Here's how I joined the tulle dress. So I've gone ahead to cut all the pieces, including the lining, and I've transferred the darts. Okay, so I've transferred all of the darts and marked everything. Okay, so now it's time to start to join. I also ironed onto the top of the fabric. So I'm going to start by holding my dart. Okay, so the points that I marked for my dart, I'm going to put them together. These are my notches. So I have pinned the dart and also drawn the shape out for both the waist dart and the bust dart. So that's what I'm just going to take over to the sewing machine and put a stitch here. This is how I sew my darts so that I don't have any pointy edges and it's not looking funny. So after that, I'm going to do just the same thing for the lining. I've sewn the darts for the main fabric and also the lining. So now I'm going to pin the lower part of the skirt to the main fabric at the waist, and I will join, and I'll also do the same thing for the lining. I'm going to pin the lower part of the lining to the lining, the lower part of the lining to the upper part of the lining, and I'm going to join. The next thing I'm going to do now is to put the lining and the main fabric together. So I'm going to pin the lining and the main fabric together like this and sew around. I'm going to sew this way with half-inch seam allowance. So, and because it's a sleeveless dress, I'm also going to sew the armhole area to the lining with half-inch seam allowance. Okay, so I have joined all the parts and I am just notching so that it's easy for me to turn. When I turn it, it will just lay flat, and then I'm going to iron. So I'm going to notch especially the corners, and I'll also notch the armhole area also. The next thing I'm going to do is to pin the zip to the back. That's the first thing to do because we're done with the front. So I'm going to open up the zip and then I'll pin it. I only used 1 inch seam allowance, so I'll pin it, okay, down as far as I want it to go, and I'll also do the same thing on the other side. As far as I want it to go on the other side, I'll also pin, and then I will sew the zip down like this. So after inserting the zip, I'm going to open up the zip and take the lining, pin to the neckline like this, and I will sew with half-inch seam allowance. I'm also going to sew this side with half-inch seam allowance, and I will do the same thing for the other side. This side of the lining that I have sewn, I'm going to flip it over like this. So I'm going to sew it on this edge, at the edge, not on the zip. On the zip, but not away from this teeth. I'm just going to take a stitch now up to half-an inch all the way. I'll do the same thing for the other side. So you take the lining, you flip it like this, and then you sew all the way down. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to join the shoulders of the front and the back together. So I have finished the inside of the zip. So I told you that when you join on the inside, you join all the way and stop, and then when you stop where I asked you to stop, you just turn your dress this way, and then you sew up the part that is left. So the next thing to do now is to join these garments at the shoulder. To join the shoulders, I'm going to put my hand inside the lining like this. It's going to be a bit hard because this sleeve is not so wide, so then I will bring this in. So I came in from the back, I put my hand in from the back, and then I will insert like the front shoulder inside it, and then I will bring it out on the other side. I'll make sure that it's straight, you know, and flat. Then I will join with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So just to show you again, you can go in from the front or the back. So you just put it inside and then you bring it out on the other side like this. Okay, and then sew with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So now I have sewn the shoulders together for both sides. Okay, so now I'm just going to bring it out from the other side. Let's see how it looks, you know, perfectly sewn, and the sides of my sleeve, they are aligned, everywhere is aligned. So you can go in again and cut off the extra seam allowance so that there's no bulk here. It looks neat and very, very neat. So the next thing to do now is to join the side, and I'm going to be joining it this way. So I'll take the front and the back. I'm going to align them here at this joining. Okay, at the joining of the lining, I'm going to make sure that this seam allowance is facing up towards the lining. So make sure the seam allowance inside is facing up towards the lining, and make sure that the sides are aligned here. And then I'll start to pin the sides together. So you pin wherever you want your darts to face. Just make sure it's facing the same thing on the other side. Whether you want to face it, it's facing down. However it looks good, you know, it's how you do it. So I don't have any joining at the waist here, so I'm just going to pin through the waist all the way down. Okay. So you pin all the way to the hem, and you do the same thing on the other side of the dress. So before I go over to the other side of the dress, I'm also going to pin the lining just the way I pinned the main fabric. I'm going to pin the lining too. So then you go over to the other side of the dress. So you put these parts together where the lining joins the fabric. You put them together. Make sure they are aligned here. Seam allowance facing up. And you start to pin. My dart was facing up on the other side, so I'm going to make it face up on this side too, okay? So pin. All the way to the hem. After pinning, the next thing to do is to mark out your allowances. So you remove the lining from the way. So I've marked out the same allowance for the other side too, starting from the bust of the main fabric, marking out the same allowance of the main fabric on the main fabric before I now sew the lining. So I have this at the bust and then at the waist, and I've marked for the hip already. I'm just going to connect all the points with my cord ruler. So just connect all the points as shown. Then I'll take it over to the sewing machine and sew. After sewing the sides of the main fabric all the way down, so I'm going to now repeat the same thing for the lining. So I'm going to grab my lining and start to pin it together. After pinning all the way down, what you want to do on your lining is to also take the exact sewing allowance that you took on the main fabric. So you mark all of that down your lining, please, on both sides, and then you sew. So after sewing the lining, I'm just going to turn my dress over. So So this is what my dress looks like now. The inside also. This is the inside of the dress. This is the. What I'm going to do now is to finish this part of, you know that when we were sewing the zip, I said you. So now I'll finish this zip part now. Take it together to my sewing machine and then stitch it down so that I will close this part of the zip. So here I'm just trimming off all the excess fabrics and hanging fabrics that I have, so that in preparation for sewing the net, and this is so that it will be easy for me to sew the net and everything will be laid correctly on the garments, so I will not have any problems when sewing it. So I'm just trimming off all these tiny excesses from the lining and also the fabric itself. So ensure to do that, especially if you're lining if you're going to use this bagging method to line your own dress too. You can actually line it however you like, any method that you use, but this is method I use for making all of my garments. I just like this bagging method for lining because of how covered all the seams are on the inside. I actually hate seeing seams on the inside of the garments I make. So now that I'm done, let's start sewing the net. I had about 4 yards before, and then I bought 4 more yards of net. So what I did is that I folded the net in half, took one side over to the other like this, and folded into 2. Net, you know, I said my net is in parts, so I did the same thing for the other parts. I tried to gather this one, but because of the volume of the net, it wasn't easy, so I decided to pleat instead. But if your machine gathers well, my sewing machine doesn't gather well, so I even tried to gather it by hand, but it wasn't working. If you have a machine that gathers well, then you can try gathering it back to the width of what you have here, and then you just sew all round. My machine doesn't do gathers well, so I just decided to pleat instead. So what I'm now going to do is, starting from this middle, from the back here, the middle scallop of the back, so I'm going to start to pleat. This net on this hem. So I will pleat round like this up to the front. When I get to the other side, I'll keep pleating again. I'll pleat again. When I'm done with all of these nets, I will grab the other one, this other one that I said I gathered before. Then wherever I stop, I'll make sure I overlap it. Then I will start to pleat again until I finish pleating round. So that is how I'm going to make the lower part of this dress. Okay, so here I finished pleating all around the skirt. You will notice I pleated round and round, so anywhere that I got to like an edge, I just overlapped it. Even if you have like pieces of net, just make sure you overlap, so that your skin is not showing at any point. That's just the trick. There's no big deal. So that's what I did. I did it in a couple of places, on the dress. Just make sure that you overlap it so that it's not showing. That's all. So I'm going to put the dress on my dress form, and then measure from shoulder to ankle length, and then I will trim all this hem, the unequal hem. So I'll just trim all of those out so that the hem is the exact length I want it to be. When I finish with that, so the next thing I'm going to do now is to use this fabric to line the net part, because if you wear it like this, your body is going to be exposed. Even with all the fitting, it's still going to show your body. You're just going to take your lining piece and just along the parts that you pleated, you just take the lining piece and also pleat on the skirt all around. just pleat it all around on the skirt like that till you get to the other side. So for the lining, you can make your pleats bigger, okay? It doesn't have to be tiny pleats like you did for the skirt. You know that it's just for the neck, it's just a lining piece. It's just space it more. It's just so that the net part of the dress is also covered. Assuming you gathered it, you can gather the lining with the net, and so that you would not have to do this later. So this is how the lining looked after I pleated it. So I ironed everything after, and this is the final look of the dress. Thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.